on the European law. I hope it's not boring to you, though. I know it's a tough topic for Saturday. I'll try to make it fun. Well, about me. So, well, the past 4.5 years, I've been working in the European Parliament on 4 different positions, basically. For different, like completely different capacities. And, you know, during like my university education, I kept telling everyone that, you know, there's one thing I'm not going to do after I graduate, is like, I'm not going to work on European law and European policies. And, you know, years later, here I am talking to you from Brussels. Okay, so here a little meme for you to kind of brighten the mood for a kind of serious topic. So are you sure you want to delete 1 GB? You know, we lost 1 member not a long time ago. First thing, let's go to the basics of what's the share of competence basically among the EU institutions first. So we have the European Council, we have the Council of the EU. So as you can see, it's a very complex and kind of similar names too. European Parliament, European Commission. We also have, let's say, talk about them first and then the other institutions. So what's the European Council? It's basically based also in Brussels. It's the summit of the heads of states or government, so prime ministers if there's no president, the president of the European Council, the president of the European Commission, and what they basically do. It gives the necessary political impetus, you know, for the development of the union, and it sets kind of general objectives and priorities. So it shows the way, the strategy, but it's not the legislator. It doesn't create law. And then we have the Council of the European Union, which is also based in Brussels. And within that structure institution, you have the 6 months presidency rotation, where you have every member state every 6 months who leads. And it's composed of 77 national ministers, 1 per state. And it's informally known, we normally call it the Council. And it acts together with the European Parliament, so where I work, as a legislator. It's called a co-decision. It shares with the Parliament also the budgetary power, which is very important for us. This is when the European Commission proposes the European budget, the annual budget, then it goes to the Council, and then it's for the European Parliament to make any kind of amendments to the budget and then start the negotiation process. And this is what I used to do in my previous job, actually. So from September till December every year, it's basically the negotiation process. And also it ensures that, which is very important for the development policies, it ensures coordination of the broad economic and social policy and sets out guidelines for the common foreign and security policy. It's quite a new tool. It's called CFSP. And it is, of course, connected very closely with the development policies too. And what it does, it concludes international agreements. So again, very important, all the trade deals, etc. And then we have the European Parliament, and it acts, as I said already before, where it's based. It's actually Brussels and Strasbourg. I don't know if everyone knows that, but it is actually explicitly written in the treaties that Strasbourg is a second equal headquarters of the European Parliament, and that's why we have so many issues now with COVID when we have to travel, and we weren't able to travel for a long time, and France wasn't really happy about it, let's say, and we were a little bit more without going. It's a really tough job there. And so it also, again, it shares with the Council the budgetary power, and what's important, the European Parliament is the only democratic body. So it exerts democratic control over the institutions, including the European Commission, and also it approves the Commission members that are not chosen by the citizens. But the European Parliament, for everyone who lives in Europe, you know that you vote, and you can vote locally. You don't have to vote on the members from your country. You can vote on members in every country that you're registered since you're a European citizen. That's why the European elections, so I can vote on Belgian members since I live in Belgium. So it's showing like this, like no nationalities, but like very European oriented type of elections. And then we have the European Commission in Brussels. This is the executive body. So it submits proposals for new legislation to the Parliament and Council of the European Union. It implements policies, of course, very important. It administers the budget, and we call the European Commission a guardian of the treaties, so ensures the compliance with European law. Otherwise, it sends it to court. And very important, competence, it negotiates international agreements. And then we also have, just briefly, we have Court of Justice of the European Union, so a judicial body based in Luxembourg, and it ensures the uniform application and also the interpretation of the European law. And it also has the power to decide legal disputes between member states, the institutions, businesses, and individuals. Then we have the European Central Bank, so money. It's based in Frankfurt, Germany, and it forms together with the national central banks, the European system of central banks, and thereby determines the monetary policy of the Eurozone. So not every country, not every member of the European Union is actually the member of the Eurozone. For example, Poland is not. So at some point, Poland also will have to join the Eurozone. Also, of course, it ensures price stability in the Eurozone by controlling the money supply. But this is not the bank that actually helps with investments. We have EBI for that, the European Investment Bank. And we have actually a body that is very often omitted by everyone, but very important when it comes to actually development policies, because, to make sure that the money of the taxpayers are well spent, you need an audit, right? So there is a European Court of Auditors based in Luxembourg, and basically checks the proper implementation of the budget. So very important body that not only when it's a very, very big issue that this is then kind of media is starting to get interested in it, but otherwise kind of no one remembers this important institution. Okay, so the legislative process. As you can see, it's a little bit complicated. Basically, how the EU decisions are made. So the EU standard decision-making procedure, it's called ordinary legislative procedure. It used to be called co-decision, which actually I used this name before. I don't know if you noticed, but it's just I'm so used to this. It used to be called co-decision, now it changed the name. It basically means that the directly elected European Parliament by the citizens has to approve EU legislation together with the Council. So with all the governments of all the 27 member states. And how we draft basically the law. Before the Commission proposes new initiatives, it census makes kind of a research on the potential economic, social, and environmental consequences that they may have. And it's called impact assessments. I would say is the most important part, because it basically sets out all the advantages and disadvantages of possible policy options. So I think this is crucial to just do a really good impact assessment, because some ideas basically have no practical solutions, or just they don't make sense when you actually do the impact assessment, because when you really do the research for more on the ground, for example, it seems like it doesn't make sense, and there is no point to keep on going with this whole long procedure of making this legislation. What happens is the Commission also consults interested parties, such as non-governmental organizations. So they talk to local authorities, industry representatives, civil society as well. There are consultations. And there are some, groups of experts that give advice on some technical issues. And in this way, the Commission kind of ensures that the legislative proposals really correspond to the needs of those concerned, but also to avoid the unnecessary red tape. So not to, as I already said, not to over-regulate. And there's special public consultations. There's a website where businesses, citizens, organizations can participate. They know that there's opening of the project someone's interested in. Basically, everyone can participate. How it's basically adopted. So then, what happens? National parliaments, of course, can say no to a legislation. Then the European Parliament, the Council, review the proposal by the Commission and propose some amendments. And if the Council and the Parliament cannot agree upon those amendments, there is a special second reading taking place. And in the second reading, the Parliament and the Council again propose amendments, and then the Parliament has the power to block the proposed legislation if it doesn't agree with the Council. If those two institutions agree on the amendments, then this legislation can be deemed adopted. And if they don't, then they got a special conciliation committee. So as you can see, there are so many stages of it. And it really does take forever. That's why there are some special, quicker procedures when it's something that has to be implemented very quickly. Especially during the pandemic, you saw a lot of new economic and budget-related policies on the table done in much quicker procedures. We have interinstitutional negotiations. This is how we negotiate. And this is something that I would say is one of the most important things, which is that basically we forget about this political part, because it's both negotiating on the technical level, but it's basically political. So the institutional negotiations, we call them trialogues because there are three parts taking place in those negotiations. It's the Parliament, is the Commission, and it's the Council. And we have basically we have meetings on the technical working level, like people like me, for example, negotiating, and then you have meetings to make those political decisions with members of the Parliament that are responsible for this file. They called rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs, so others who are working on this particular file from another political group. And this, I would have to make another presentation on that. We have different political groups in the European Parliament. Okay, so basically, trilogues may be organized at any stage of the legislative procedure. So you have those first, second, and third readings, as I said. Basically, any provisional agreement reached in trilogues is informal and has to be approved by the formal procedures applicable within each of the two institutions. So in the Parliament, the text has to be, the agreed text in those negotiations has to be approved by a vote in the committee first. So always in the thematic committee. And then after which, so for development policy, it will be DEVE, development committee. And after this, with the amendments already in, it has to be confirmed in the plenary. Plenary session is when the whole Parliament of right now, I mean, for today, it's 705 members of the Parliament. It does change. And they all meet at least once per month, sometimes twice per month. We have also some mini sessions. And in October, we have 2 sessions, actually, because of the budgetary procedure. And we basically also members can also have amendments to the text already agreed in the negotiations. I mean, sometimes are not, and then everyone is happy who works in the Parliament on the file, because that means that you don't have to do a special voting list. Otherwise, you have to prepare special voting lists with a lot of indications for the members. Okay, I hope that's clear. More or less. And now into something more concrete when it comes to development itself. I'm not going to bore you anymore with creating law itself. So development and international cooperation programs and funding instruments, any kind of opportunities. So basically, to implement European development assistance and international cooperation, we design different types of programs, which can be either geographic, so it's targeting a specific country or region, or thematic, so it's targeting a specific sector, like agriculture, for example. And so basically, the funding instruments help us define this legal framework and scope of the programs. And then it specifies, of course, which actors and areas eligible for the funding. So we've been negotiating until literally 28th or 27th of December last year. It was my last days of actually work when I worked on the budget. We concluded the MFF 2021-2027, which it's a multi-financial framework. So when we have annual European budgets, we also have 7-year long-term budget with programming per year. And there was a novelty introduced, whole part of the budget that's called the Global Europe Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. And this is basically the main financial tool of the EU's international cooperation for the period 2021-2027. And it basically simplified a lot of programs that we used to have. Also, so the whole programming and the financial decisions made for the development programs. So programming is the decision-making process through which we define like the medium to long-term planning. And what the Commission does it with an European External Action Service, EES. You might know them. Right now, the head of EES is Borelli. And then, of course, there are partner countries and their regions, and also there are permanent delegations of the EU in the developing countries as well. And of course, they kind of coordinating and giving data here to Brussels. And the programming of the Global in Europe instrument, where all those programs are in, was launched in November last year, and it should be completed by the end of this year. And then it will be adopted by the Commission of like geographic and thematic multi-annual indicative programming documents. So you basically per program you need to indicate it. It's very complex. And then based on all the discussions with the partner countries, civil society, EU member states, donors, stakeholders, lobbyists, of course, then those kind of objectives in programs and programming documents are being created. And then you get basically like annual action programs and annual work programs for grants, specify the legislation, objectives, schedule of calls for proposals, because this is important. There are websites where you have calls for proposals where people can submit their applications, but also ask questions. And in those calls for proposals, of course, they indicate the amounts of funding and expected results of the programs. There is a new program. It's a new Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. So the changes the proposed would bring the proposed regulation a major restructuring of this whole external action instrument. So it's basically merging the 10 regulations that used to be in the budget. So instead of focusing on multiple programming processes, now they're trying to put same objectives and put it all under the one parasol. And the part of the simplification is the integration of the European Development Fund, which is very important. It used to, so far it has been one of the main instruments to provide assistance to African, Caribbean and Pacific countries, and to other like overseas countries and territories into the EU budget. And right now, the European Parliament will be able to extend its supervision to this program, which is really important, especially when it comes to the revision and also the supervision of how money has been. Basically, there is, and what kind of countries we basically cover. So the proposed regulation would have 3 main components. It's a like geographical, thematic, and rapid response component, and this flexibility reserve that we didn't have before. So it works for geographical programs in the European neighborhood, like Algeria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Palestine, Syria, all the countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, Americas, the Caribbean. And the geographical programs would focus on the following areas. It would be like good governance, democracy, rule of law, human rights, but also poverty eradication, fight against inequalities in human development, migration and mobility, which I sometimes feel people forgotten. Also the issue of climate refugees, which is, I think, very dear to our hearts, all of us here, and environment and climate change, of course, inclusive and sustainable growth and decent employment, and security, stability, and peace. what else can I say about there are different instruments. There's also an instrument called an external action guarantee, is stability and peace. So in the conflict areas. Okay, this you really don't need to pay too much attention to this graphic. I honestly put it because to show you the complexity of how it's built. So please don't try to focus too much or try to read those small letters. That's not the point. The point is to show how complex this whole development policies is in the European Union, and how distributed and how many departments there are for different regions, but also different topics. So this is the European External Action Service, and basically it sets the coordination framework. It works hand in hand with the European Commission services. It also ensures EU development aid's coherence. And as I said, it's Josep Borrell, Spanish, who is now the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. And at the same time, his role is to be a vice president of the European Commission, since, as you know, the president is Ursula von der Leyen. There are also very important, let's say, institutions on the ground that are, I think, making the biggest effort and the biggest, because they basically are they giving the direct data back to Brussels, which is EU delegations around the world. And I can tell that everyone is probably dreaming to work for one of them here. And basically the EU delegations, they represent the EU in their host countries and are like first line, and also for implementing, of course, and managing the development programs on the ground. And they also have this, they're given some kind of margin to readjust if needed, like in case of conflict happening on the ground that hasn't been, you know, quite unexpected, or natural disasters, of course. So they have this margin. They, of course, need to ask kind of for confirmation, but they do have this margin of flexibility when it comes to the funding, and also moving the funding from, for example, one area to another, for example, when the natural disaster happens. And of course, EU countries. And the bilateral cooperation with developing countries reinforce it as well. And just from my side also, of course, trade deals, which very often we omit, but I find them, they also part of the development policy, and depending on how they build, I mean, they can enhance or actually make living on the ground worse. And finding the balance in between, let's say, between a good trade deal for the European Union countries, but at the same time, for example, getting food that is good quality without harnessing the environment back on the ground, but at the same time letting people actually make money in the developing countries by importing their food. You know, it's a huge challenge. And what's very important for, I mean, of course, is the money. And there's what I already mentioned, the European Investment Bank, and it provides us with financial support, but mostly by granting loans and through specific mechanisms. Like there's, for example, the facility for Euro-Mediterranean Investment and Partnership, called FEMIP, and there is the EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund. Okay, and here we have pilot projects, preparatory actions. I didn't want to put any specific, I just showed you that basically what it shows is the idea. So it brings up the ideas and kind of trying to make sure if they might be good solutions to be put in the European budget long term. And so those are the tools, those projects in the European Union that they basically aim at testing new policy initiatives or preparing the ground for the adoption of future measures. And they also give the member states, you know, the members of the European Parliament, the possibility to initiate innovative policies, something that you've never seen before, for example, in the budget, and fund them in advance of a legal basis being set. So you already have this legal basis. And then both new pilot projects and preparatory actions and those continued from previous years, they must be included as amendments in the EU budget every year. I would say they're kind of on an experimental nature. So you can really experiment, get something innovative trying to put through. so that you can make a budgetary commitment for this kind of project for not more than 2 consecutive financial years, and then you decide how much money you put in. So it's basically members of the parliament who can come up with a solution, with an idea. They do a little research, they do a little bit of lobbying in the European Commission, because what happens is the European Commission is then grading the project and giving kind of a explanation of, do they think it's feasible to actually introduce this kind of project on the ground. As you can, so this is kind of a way to make also development policies not only in Europe but outside. There is maximum 40 million euros for a budgetary year for the pilot projects and 50 million for new preparatory actions. So this means that the maximum annual allocation for both is 140 million euros. So it's quite a lot of money. And how you do it, you basically, again, you negotiate a lot. You trade with other political groups, and you put your priorities. And what I can say was very interesting, I did see during those couple of years that I was working on the budget, was that some of the projects actually made it as really very major policies in the EU. And there's something that is also part of a development policies, but actually within the European Union, which is the just transition mechanism. I'm not going to expand on that because this is not a topic of our discussions, but definitely this is a mechanism that got introduced thanks to this kind of project that was proposed. And right now, it's one of the major tools, or is also connected to the Green New Deal. Since, of course, climate change and environmental degradation is basically an existential threat. So, I mean, there's like those 3 main issues that are very important within the European Green New Deal. And it's supposed to transform the EU into like a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy, but no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. Economic growth decoupled from resource use. So basically changing the whole concept of what's economic growth and how do we actually measure it. And no person, they call it no person and no place left behind. So basically the social aspect, the social pillar of this whole transition. And this just transition mechanism is basically a part, I would say, of this no person and no place left behind. And it's basically a key tool to ensure that the transition towards a climate neutral economy happens in a fair way. So leaving no one behind, basically ensuring all the programs to mobilize, to relearn new skills for people who have been in this job market of like extensive carbon extensive region, to teach them new skills, to start new, to help start new companies in renewables, etc., etc. So to basically alleviate the socioeconomic impact of the transition that is needed. Okay, I finished now, I promise. This is, if you ever see this lovely meme, it's actually, yeah, it's a meme, but it's a reality, still working on law to be able to watch things from other countries. So sorry about that, couple of years and still no agreement, they still negotiating. So, and my references, there you go. Okay.